All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind. But we're going to have a show.
Oh, thank you all so very much. I'm humbled and indeed encouraged and, might I say, buoyed by the recorded applause. It's a Friday show on this channel, and we have so many people working hard behind the scenes, but none in front of the scenes today. It is just I, or is it just me? Let's see. It's just I think is the way you say it. So, in any case, I'm... the point I'm trying to make is that today is a special day. We're doing a best of show today, and I hope that you're happy. It was curated by Kim, so I don't know that it's something that I can even speak to. I'm sure she's made wise decisions. I don't want to... be a control freak and ask her what's in the best of show.
I blame you.
So Kim has curated this, and if you like it, you can give her credit.
Kim, how are you?
And if you don't, you can blame Kim. But I'm excited to see it myself, knowing nothing about what's going to be presented. But here it is, our best of show. Enjoy. On Iran and the Middle East, I think this guy is without peer, just brilliant. I get his Substack and just soak it in as much as I can. I think you'll appreciate, if you have never seen Trita Parsi before, how clear his takes are. I will link to his Substack underneath this conversation. How about it for Trita Parsi, everyone?
Thank you so much, Mark. Really appreciate that kind introduction.
Well, it's sincere.
Hard for me to live up to it now.
You'll do it effortlessly, I'm sure. You speak of so many things in your Substacks and in your posts. And one of the things you've noted is something that I very much understand, and that is the anxiety that everyone can have who's involved in the negotiations in the Middle East right now, because no one can trust anybody else. And I think the mistrust is sort of well placed with the Israelis, with the Iranians, and the Americans.
Certainly. And that mistrust has always been an issue. I never thought that the mistrust could become so much deeper, but it has. I mean, we're talking about 45 years of really bad U.S.-Iran relations, misdeals, all of these different kinds of things. And then it becomes worse. It becomes worse more than anything else because Trump twice bombed the Iranians in the midst of negotiations. And now he needs a deal with them, and they need a deal with him as well. Both of them are in dire need of an arrangement, an agreement on this issue to extradite themselves from the current situation. But now the mistrust is really coming back to haunt Trump, because one of the things that is happening, part of the reason why there hasn't been a deal yet, is because the Iranians are getting cold feet. And you have some elements there that are arguing very strongly against a deal period, regardless of what the details are, because of this mistrust, because of the belief that Trump will betray the agreement, that he's only trying to calm things down before the midterms in order to attack Iran again after the midterms, because they believe that he's not going to deliver on the sanctions relief, all of these different things. And what's also happening, the dynamic of the negotiations, which I think is quite telling of how bad the mistrust is and how it backfires on someone, and why you should be careful not to build that type of a negative reputation, is that the Iranians are very suspicious when they've seen that Trump actually has shown flexibility and given them a lot in the negotiations. And then they're also very suspicious when he's not giving them anything and he's pursuing a maximalist demand. Both things are just fueling their suspicion that something suspicious is going on. Why is he being so easy to agree to these things, and why is he not being so easy to agree to? Whatever he does, it just fuels that suspicion. And it wouldn't be this scenario if there had been a modicum of trust between the two sides, if they had not been burned as badly as they have been by engaging in these negotiations. And I think you also have to understand, despite the fact that Iran is not a democracy in the Western liberal sense, it does not mean that they don't have politics. They do have politics. And those who are pushing for this deal, even they are having some cold feet because they're going to have their name on this agreement. Those who had their names on the previous agreement, the JCPOA that Obama pushed for, have, it's cost them a lot because Trump pulled out of it and Biden never back into it. So a lot of those politicians, such as the former foreign minister, Javad Zarif, who was a brilliant negotiator who negotiated this deal from the Iranian side, has been attacked viciously because the JCPOA at the end of the day didn't work because the US betrayed it. And it's not just Trump. Biden as well did not go back into this deal. So it's not as easy for the proponents of the JCPOA in Iran to say, well, look, who could have expected someone like Trump becoming president? Yes, but then Biden came in and he didn't do it. So it's not Trump that is the exception. It was Obama that was the exception. And you signed the deal with the exception. And that was the naive mistake that you committed.
Wow, that's quite the framework. Because you mentioned it, tell me why, in your judgment, Biden didn't try to get it back on track.
I think there's several different factors. One is that you had a team there. Many of them were holdovers from Obama, but they were not in the key positions. So, for instance, Rob Malley was a very, very productive team member in the negotiations of the JCPOA, and then he became the lead negotiator, but he was not the one deciding the strategy. That was decided above his head, and I don't think he ever would have gone along with that strategy himself or come up with that strategy himself. So he was essentially dealt a very bad hand to deal with. Those who were pushing for that strategy were doing so because partially they wanted to prove themselves to be better than Obama. Many of them were coming from the Clinton circle, not from the Obama circle. And there was also a bit of a chip of the shoulder on Biden himself in this regard, that he wanted to prove himself better. So early on, they were talking about how they were going to get a longer and stronger deal. And they were actually going to use Trump's sanctions as leverage to get that better deal. And once the Iranians realized that, that's when they went up to 60% enriched uranium. They weren't doing that even under Trump's first term. They did that under Biden because they realized that Biden was actually going to play the same game as the Iranians. And remember, this was even under COVID. Malley did not even manage to get the Biden administration to agree to just make sure that the IMF or the World Bank could give a $5 billion loan to the Iranians that almost every development country got in order to be able to deal with COVID. Even that they blocked. And this is after they themselves had been criticizing Trump's sanctions for such a long time. And of course, there was the other element, which is critical, which was that some of them did not want to have a big fight with the Israelis. They thought that Obama unnecessarily had ended up in that fight, as if there was a way to get a deal with Iran that did not cause a fight with Israel. So they spent and wasted a lot of time trying to appease the Israelis. And eventually what ended up happening, they got no deal. And they did not prove themselves to be stronger than Obama, because Obama actually got a deal and these guys didn't. And that's on top of all of the other things that they did in order not to have a confrontation with the Israelis, such as supporting that genocide in Gaza.
Yeah, and I want to get to Israel, very relevant to everything going on just at this moment. It's an extraordinary thing that there are so many moving parts here, and it's fascinating to hear you talk about the Biden dance, because we forget it. We forget that these deals take time. The Obama deal, nuclear deal, took a long time to forge. As you say, it was quite an accomplishment. And that's why there's a certain absurdity to Trump with these pronouncements about how he wants a deal that's going to be better than Obama. Now, he'd love to have the Obama deal and just put his name on it. But the point is, even that deal, whatever deal he has in his mind, would take a very long time, and he doesn't have a long time.
He does not have a long time at this point. There's a lot that already has been negotiated, to be frank with you. There's a lot of these things that are not necessarily going to be new solutions. They just have to tweak them a little bit. I think the Iranians are also making a huge mistake if they think that they can just outlast Trump and thinking, okay, they're just going to wait and wait because he's going to become desperate. What they're missing, if they're thinking that, is that his ability to deliver sanctions relief, his ability to push forward a good deal, in many ways is strongest now, before the midterms. After the midterms, when he has a completely different political situation to deal with, he is a lame duck president. If he loses both the House and the Senate, he's going to be dealing with impeachment. Probably not successfully, but nevertheless, it will take up a lot of his time and a lot of his political maneuverability. under those circumstances, his ability to put the necessary level of sanctions relief on the table is going to be dramatically compromised. So the moment to actually strike a deal, in my view, is in the next couple of weeks and months. I mean, I wouldn't wait that long to say even months. And on top of that, you mentioned Israel. Israel is entering its election season right now. There's going to be elections sometime between now and October. And that is also another opportunity, because in the midst of the negotiations, mindful of how well Trump is polling in Israel, it's going to be very difficult for Israeli politicians to attack Trump on this deal, because he can hurt them, because he has a lot of support in Israel. And I'm sure you noticed that 2 or so weeks ago, out of nowhere, suddenly he said that he's polling at 99% in Israel. And then he said, perhaps I should run for office there. I don't think he was joking. I think he was threatening. That was a veiled threat to some of the Israeli politicians to say, if you attack me over this deal, I can attack you back. And I'm popular and I'm strong in Israel, and I can actually unseat you.
Well, that brings me to the latest reporting, and you wrote about this in your Substack, the shouting match between Trump and Netanyahu. Again, you put a question mark over the reporting just to the point that we can't be absolutely certain what happened in that conversation, but that F-bombs were traded, and essentially it was a brushback pitch against Netanyahu. You know, you guys have to back off on your Lebanon incursion. This is crazy. And the adventurism that has been reflected by Israeli movement in Lebanon has all of a sudden become a centerpiece of the Iranian position, this hardening of the Iranian position, which relates to Israel and Lebanon. Now, speak to the two things. A, what you spoke of in your Substack, which was the conversation between Netanyahu and Trump. And then, if you would please, Lebanon and the Israeli relevance in terms of the hardening Iranian negotiation.
Sure. On the Substack last night, I posted something to just, because I saw there was a lot of skepticism about the Axios story. And look, Axios has been wrong on so many things, and it's increasingly turning into a gossip site rather than a news site. So I understand skepticism. I also understand that the backdrop of it is that we heard a lot of reports on Axios again that, you know, privately Biden was really upset with Trump, with Netanyahu, but of course publicly we saw no change in policy. We saw a continued united front in favor of the Israelis, even as they were committing a genocide. So given that there's a lot of resistance to believing that this Axios story, which is an explosive one, essentially Trump told Netanyahu that he's fucking crazy, that everyone hates you, and that everyone hates Israel because of you now, and that he was really pushing him to back off of his threats on Lebanon.
And he said, you'd be in prison without me. That's what he
exactly.
said.
You know, a lot of that actually is very, you know, compatible with the pattern that we've seen with Trump, that he believes that people constantly owe him. And in that specific case, you know, he's not necessarily wrong. As I wrote in my Substack, I thought that if the Axios report had said that Trump had told Netanyahu that everyone loves you, that would have been a much more implausible story to accept. When he says everyone hates you, I think that checks out in many different ways. But what I pointed out, though, is that there actually are some important data points in Trump's own experience just in the last year that shows that he actually has had these public blowouts with Netanyahu, and that there's been changes of policies, at least temporarily. Going back to how he mediated a ceasefire between Iran and Israel in the June war, the 12-day war. The Israelis started violating it, and he just had a fit on the White House lawn, dropped the F-bomb.
Yeah, do we have that? Sorry to interrupt you, Trita Parsi, but we have that video, and I want to play it. Here it is. This is what Trita Parsi is talking about.
Israel says that Iran violated the peace agreement, the ceasefire agreement. Do you believe that Iran is still committed to the peace?
Yeah, I do. They violated it, but Israel violated it too.
Are you questioning if Israel is committed?
Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I'd never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because of one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand?
Yeah, so there it is. You're right. He drops it right there. So he's capable.
He drops it. Yeah. And I don't think we can recall a single moment in which Biden expressed views of this kind or that type of a strong criticism, even in the context of Iran, in which Trump is saying, look, I'm not happy with the Iranians, but I'm really unhappy with the Israelis. You just didn't see that before. And I'm not saying that gives him a pass, that means that, he's fundamentally different. I was just raising these issues to provide some context to say that I think there's reasons to believe that Axios story is plausible. And I give one other example, which is really important. In September of last year, the Israelis broke another red line. They attacked Doha. They bombed, trying to kill the Hamas negotiators who were there negotiating with the Qataris because the United States government had asked Qatar to mediate this conflict. They failed to kill them. Other regional states come together. They press Trump to really push back the Israelis. Trump calls in Netanyahu to the Oval Office, and in the Oval Office, he forces him to read an apology with the Emir of Qatar being on the other side of the line. And then the news breaks of this. Netanyahu denies that he ever apologized. So the White House actually releases a picture of Netanyahu holding the phone and holding a paper in which he's reading off of it. So, again, this is unprecedented. We've never seen something like that. The problem is that the Israelis, when Trump throws these fits, they back down, they abide for a moment, because Trump does not sustain the pressure to make sure that they stay within a ceasefire agreement or whatever it is. Eventually, the Israelis find a way to wiggle their way out of it. And that's the main problem. It's not whether that actual event happened exactly as Axios said. Something happened. Trump was pressuring them to get out of Lebanon or get out of Beirut. The details may not be entirely correct. I suggest that they are, because they actually do sound like him. The question, though, is he going to sustain that pressure? Now, that gets us to the second point you raised. Why is it important that he sustains that pressure? Because the Iranians made it clear from the outset that one of their conditions for agreeing to a peace with the United States is that it has to be a region-wide ceasefire, which obviously then includes Lebanon. 3 key reasons as to why this is important to them. First of all, there's a strong Shia population in the south of Lebanon. It's been a long-time ally of the Iranians, even prior to the Islamic Republic. Even the Shah of Iran was investing in the Shias of southern Lebanon. And there's a narrative there that the Iranians abandoned them in 2024. And the Iranians are very adamant about making sure that they don't do anything now that validates that narrative. But secondly, and perhaps more directly to their core interest, as long as the Israelis are allowed to continue to bomb and ethnically cleanse, etc., that instability has the risk of spilling over into yet another Israeli-Iranian war. It already has twice. And twice that war has brought the US back into the war. And the Iranians are looking for an end to the war, not just a ceasefire. And if you want to have a sustainable end to the war, you cannot have that instability caused by Israel in Lebanon, because that risks spilling over and it just completely jeopardizes the entire agreement. And mindful of the fact that the Iranians are expected to give irreversible concessions, such as shipping out their enriched uranium, they're not going to get that back if Israel attacks Lebanon and breaks the entire peace agreement. That's still going to be shipped out, most likely. So it's important for them that this is stable and sustainable. And that brings us to the third reason. If the United States is incapable or unwilling, at least the unwilling part we seem to have dealt with now, but the incapable of reining in the Israelis, and the Israelis and then are free to restart wars and drag the US into it, what's the value of an agreement with the United States?
Wow.
And these are very valid questions that they're asking, and I think Trump has recognized this, and he, as a result, did put that pressure on the Israelis, recognizing that the entire agreement with Iran is being jeopardized because Netanyahu, for his own reasons, is trying to annex more territory in southern Lebanon, etc., etc. And so he's now pushing back. Now, whether it's sustained or not, that's the key question.
Yeah, and I wonder, this is where I think you really have such a good handle on some of the nuances, because the Iranian side is made up of these political factions to which you've referred. And I wonder on what level Lebanon becomes a pretext for stopping the ceasefire negotiations for, because Iran also feels as though they have some leverage right now. Is there a faction within Iran that, again, is using the Israel-Lebanon thing as a pretext for that?
I think that's a great question, Mark, because I think there is a risk of that. I don't know for certain if that is the case, but I would suspect that those who are opposed to a deal, and they are there, and they seem to be gaining steam, at a minimum, they're paralyzing the others, can use Lebanon as that pretext. There is a consensus within that system that Lebanon has to be included, it has to be region-wide. Now, there's a question mark, how far are the Iranians willing to go? Are they going to jeopardize the entire deal because, the Israelis are still doing some stuff in Lebanon? There's always those different gradations, and we don't know for certain. Would they be willing to risk everything? And I wrote about one of the options. They're looking about that on my Substack last week or so. I'll be happy to go into it because it's a very unexpected counter-escalation they would do, perhaps, if Israel is in the deal but wiggles its way out. But bottom line is there's a consensus that has to be included. But the question is, are they really willing to sacrifice everything over this issue? And that gives an opportunity for some of those who absolutely do not want to see an agreement to point to Israel and Lebanon and then use it from their standpoint as a pretext to sabotage the entire deal. And part of the reason that it would be potent is because A, there is a consensus that it has to be included. So it's not a conflicted issue in which some people say, Lebanon doesn't need to be included. It is something that they've all agreed upon. And secondly, Netanyahu has a tremendous amount of agency. This is not something in which, Trump can just make a decision and it's done. I do believe that Trump has tremendous amount of leverage over Netanyahu and he should be using it. But nevertheless, Netanyahu does have agency. So this is not a direct negotiations between the U.S. and Iran in which perhaps, the U.S. needs to lift sanctions. Well, then the agency is with Trump more than anything else. But when it comes to what happens in Lebanon, at the end of the day, you cannot eliminate the agency that Netanyahu has.
Yeah, most certainly. In fact, that's one of the most complicating aspects to this. So talk to us, give us a minute or two about Lebanon in our last few minutes here, because I think it's sort of been orphaned in some of the early press media about Iran and America and this entire thing. And even as we saw the striking out at the Emiratis and some of the American military bases, and it was something of surprise to sort of see this kind of attack on American soft targets. Lebanon was, again, I felt like it was orphaned in a lot of media reports, and now it's taken center stage in any kind of negotiation.
Yeah, again, it's something that I think a lot of folks on the Western side had kind of missed how important it is to Iran, how the connectivity is very crucial there. I think there's oftentimes a simplification in which they think the Iranis are just, playing some sort of ideological game, and as a result, they really do not care that much about some of their allies, etc. And there's definitely been clear moments in which perhaps some of those relationships have been overstated. So, for instance, when in the media, oftentimes we're referring to Hezbollah as if it is just a mere proxy of Iran. That also then creates a mental image in which the idea that the Iranians might sacrifice their proxy is much, much easier to conclude than if it is seen as a partnership and an alliance. It's much more difficult to sacrifice an ally and a partner than it is to sacrifice a proxy. A proxy is essentially just a piece on the chessboard that you use and you consume at some point. But precisely because it isn't a proxy relationship, I'm not saying that the Iranians don't have sway over Hezbollah or that they're not a key supporter of them, but the simplification of just turning them into a proxy then lends itself to people believing that this would never have been a key issue in the negotiations because the Iranians would just sacrifice that. And that's just not simply the case. One of the things the Iranians may do, and I wrote about it in the Substack last week, is to actually use the horizontal escalation they did before in the beginning of the war as a counter to this. So imagine a scenario in which the Israelis are pressed by Trump to agree to a ceasefire, but within a week or two, they start to wiggle their way out. This puts the Iranians in a tough position because by that time, it's very clear they got in the sanctions relief and everything else. would they really sacrifice all of that for Lebanon? And one of the options the Iranians then are looking at is, instead of withdrawing from the deal, which perhaps wouldn't serve anything, you would not get a ceasefire and you would not get a deal, the Iranians just simply escalate somewhere else. And that the Iranians would then pursue a Lebanon for UAE type of a formula, in which for every time the Israelis are attacking Lebanon, an Iranian ally, the Iranians will attack the UAE, an Israeli ally. And the logic is simply, if the US is going to accept that the ceasefire will tolerate an Israeli attack on an Iranian ally, then it should also tolerate an Iranian attack on an Israeli ally. And this kind of puts the ball back in the US court. Again, it shows you how critical it is to make sure we avoid those scenarios, that we do get a ceasefire that is region-wide. It's good for the US, it's good for the region. Ultimately, it's going to be good for Israel as well.
Sure.
Instead of thinking, let's have a deal, but let's allow warfare elsewhere within the region, even if there's such connectivity.
Right. Increasing the connectivity is fascinating. It's interesting. Also, Trita Parsi, this posting and smack talking, which is so much a part of who Trump is, this public negotiation is very much, and I think I've read you write about this in the past, the fact that it really doesn't serve anyone's goals to have these sort of public negotiations.
Yeah, I have to say this is definitely the worst way of negotiating between countries that are so proud, that have leaders that have such sensitivity to make sure that they look good, that they look strong, that they're not looking as if they're caving, as if they're the weaker party in the negotiations. This is just not the way of doing it. Remember how the Obama administration did Cuba. We had no idea. Just suddenly we woke up one day and we realized that they had negotiated the deal. They had avoided all of the political costs that would have come, all of the media attention at the attacks, if that was a public negotiation. Incidentally, that's exactly how the Trump administration did the Abraham Accords. An accord that I personally think is highly, highly problematic. I don't think the US should have done it, but nevertheless, also done completely quietly. And one day we woke up and found out they got the Emiratis to throw the Palestinians completely under the bus and sign this deal with the Israelis. And all the Israelis had to do was to ask the US to give a bunch of concessions to these Arab states. There were no concessions from the Israeli side. But nevertheless, that was also done very quietly. And one day we woke up and it was done. Now, in the Iran case, there was never that option because the war was obviously very public. So the negotiation would be public to a certain extent. It didn't have to be this public. That's unhelpful, I think. And it's frankly put undue pressure on Trump himself.
I want to ask you about Israeli military capabilities in my last few moments here, because there's a lot of talk, and we've done it here in this conversation, because it is so central to the future, the impulses of Netanyahu, his political and even criminal exposure, and just his, it seems almost unmoored desire to, expand Israel in this way. I want to ask you if the IDF itself, that the military fighting force isn't, I've read a lot about how they're sort of overtaxed, how they really are struggling. So for all we're seeing this fighting force expanding in all of these different theaters of conflict, the reality is that they're tired, might just be a way to put it. I wonder if you can just speak to that and how that might be a component in all this.
So I can't claim to have expertise on that, but based on the conversations I've had with Israeli colleagues, etc., it's very clear. Already for quite some time, there is fatigue. Israel has been running on a war economy, and it's been really heavily subsidized by the United States at the end of the day to be able to continue to operate. You have a large number of Israelis that have been displaced for a long period of time, etc. And, militarily as well, things have really shifted very fast. The Israelis thought that they really had crushed Hezbollah, and they went in, and in some phases of the war, it looked as if actually even on the ground inside of Lebanon, they were very successful. But then suddenly Hezbollah started to use these fiber optic drones that cannot be jammed electronically. And now, just in the last couple of weeks, they've inflicted significant casualties on the Israeli side, and has just changed the nature, and it's made it much more difficult for the Israelis to advance. This is also part of the reason why Netanyahu is under pressure at home. he needs to deliver some success on Lebanon, particularly mindful of the fact that the expectations were so high, and he's failed to do so. And on top of that, Trump comes now and tells him, you can't do it at all because you have to withdraw because we're trying to get a larger deal here. This is part of the dynamics that are taking place there. And again, had the military success already been far, far greater than it has been and at the level that they expected, perhaps Netanyahu wouldn't be having some of these problems, at least at this point.
My last question is related to the nuclear material, which has really been the centerpiece, although it wasn't articulated for days. We didn't know what the centerpiece was of this entire thing. But now Trump can't stop talking about it. You know, I don't want them to have nuclear, all the nuclear dust. I don't want them to have this. We're going to, all the enriched uranium, et cetera, is going to. The value of a nuclear program seems so manifestly clear. Will the Iranians really give up that capability to the Americans or to any kind of agreement to get peace?
So the Iranians will not give any capability. So I think it's important to make a differentiation between the stockpile of enriched uranium that they have amassed over the course of the years and enrichment technology as a whole. They're not going to give up enrichment technology. They may end up agreeing to several years of not enriching uranium because they don't have a need for it, because their two reactors that need fuel pads are already serviced and they have enough fuel pads for lasting them 5, 7, perhaps 10 years, 12 years. And that in themselves is a huge concession, because in the past, even when they didn't need to enrich for these reactors, they were still continuing to enrich. The stockpile is a different issue. That's a material that has been produced. They can give it up and they can rebuild it if they start enriching again. Trump, Obama got 98% of Iran's stockpile to be shipped out. Trump is looking to get 100% of it. Part of the reason why he wants 100% may just be because he wants to outdo Obama, just as Biden tried to outdo Obama. Now, whether he can get it or not remains to be seen. I've seen some flexibility on the Iranian side in which even 100% may be considered, but it very much depends on what Trump is willing to put on the table in return. And here Trump is much stronger than both Obama and Biden, because Trump is actually willing to put all sanctions on the table. He's willing to put primary sanctions on the table. Those are the sanctions that prevent American companies from doing business in Iran. In fact, he's far more interested in lifting primary sanctions than secondary sanctions. So if he were to lift secondary sanctions, he would allow European companies to trade with Iran, but not American companies. And that just goes against everything he claims to stand for. So, and he doesn't have this kind of hesitation that previous presidents did, in which they hated the idea of lifting sanctions. And they thought it would be a very politically costly thing for them to do. So he's willing to put much more on the table, and that's going to be necessary in order to get the Iranians to give much more. Now, whether the proportions end up being something that both sides are satisfied with, that's what this negotiation is going to end up determining.
It's fascinating to talk to you with such deep knowledge of all of this, Trita Parsi. I recommend the Substack, which you should check out, and we'll have a link, as I say. But for those who are listening on Spotify and iHeartRadio, it's tritaparsi.substack.com, TRITAPARSI.substack.com. I'm so grateful for you giving us
my pleasure
time today. Really enjoyed it, and I look forward to it.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Have
you.
a good one.
All
Thank
the best,
you.
Trita Parsi. Yeah.
The Mark Thompson Show.
People ask me all the time, Mark, you're constantly drinking coffee, and clearly your energy level is sustained by some other worldly power. And to some degree, it is Coachella Valley Coffee.
What?
I know. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com is where I get all my coffee. All organic, ethically sourced from women-owned farms, but it's delicious. I say but because if it were only organic, ethically sourced from women-owned farms, I mean, that would be a great brag, but it may not be speaking to how terrific the coffee is. The coffee is otherworldly. I'm drinking it right now, as a matter of fact, and even in this moment, I can tell you that it is taking me to a wonderful place. The El Gato Espresso, one of my favorites. The Sunrise Blend is delicious. The Eclipse, something special. There are teas and coffees. There is a cold brew for the heat of summer. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com is a boutique roastery. There are the teas. Tony's showing them to you now.
Thanks, Tony.
And you will find, I think, any number of things, teas, spices, coffees that you want to make part of your life regularly. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. There are subscriptions you can buy. You can find the most economical way to buy it. Sometimes you buy more than 1 pound at a time. And whatever you do, you'll get 10% off with our discount code MARKT. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. When you check out, use our discount code MARKT, 10% off. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com.
Put that coffee down.
It will not disappoint you. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Brilliant best-selling author. And I've always recommended her books to you, and I know you guys send me emails and you indicate in the comments, hey, I've just got all of her books. I just bought her book. Oh my God, I just put down her book. It's incredible. I get so much of that after her appearances here. And I have really good news for those who are fans of Sarah Kedzior or who have yet to discover Sarah Kedzior and want to. Sarah Kedzior has a special. It's today only. 2 of Sarah's books are on sale in ebook form for $2.99. Hiding in Plain Sight and They Knew, both for $2.99. The sale lasts only today, and we're going to have a link to buy the books. And I will tell you that, as I've mentioned before, you can almost crack the book anywhere, any of her books, and get right into it. Like, wow. She talks about Epstein and transnational organized crime and Trump and the discovery of Trump and the varnishing of Trump and the varnishing of all of these transnational criminals. So can't speak more positively about Sarah's work, and today, great sale. So again, in ebook form, $2.99 for Hiding in Plain Sight and They Knew. The sale lasts only today, and we'll have links to it under this video. Now, without any further delay, Sarah Kedzior. Hi.
Hi, thank you for that.
Yeah. I didn't want to bring you on and have you to sit there while I had to do the commercial for your books. I just felt it'd be awkward, you know.
Yeah, that would be, so thank you.
That was my thinking on that. But wow, I'll start with the big news, and then I thought of you in relation to a couple of stories and presidential pardons, and I wanted to get your thoughts on those. But you know, as the politics of tragedy is played out in America right now, it really strikes me as everything's just at lower and lower ebb. Like the discourse can't get worse, and yet it does. So National Guard troops that, in my judgment, shouldn't be in Washington, D.C. to begin with, are there. 2 are the victims of the shooting from an Afghani who, as it turns out, was vetted quite extensively as a result of a CIA participation. And now, in the wake of this tragedy, the blame goes to the Biden administration for this, even though the actual asylum was granted under the Trump administration. So the manifest nature of the lie is right there, and yet it's the clear MAGA talking point. Some thoughts?
I mean, I think this is part of Trump's general move to, one, just depopulate the United States in general, but in particular target Muslims, regardless of their background. In his first term, he had a list of countries, seemingly chosen at random. They didn't correspond to national security concerns. What they had in common is that they were all Muslim majority countries. And I think this is another case of this. We see, in this case, we have a armed terrorist, but then they use this individual to cast blame on anyone from Afghanistan and any family, including people who have fought on behalf of this country, including people who are suffered from our invasion of their country. I'm seeing cases of students, from Iran. There's a Johns Hopkins student who got stuck at the Canadian border and now is just basically stateless because he was going to visit his brother. There's these really benign actions being taken by either American citizens or green card holders or people kind of in the midst of the immigration process, and they suddenly are being kicked out of the country with no recourse, with legal recourse they can't afford, and with no institutional support. That's what's happening to a lot of these college kids and people who were here, to do work and research that usually is thought of as positive because it benefits our country. So I see this as just part of a broader sadistic plan.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the pause is hit on all Afghani refugee processes. That includes those that are on the verge of getting asylum, who have been vetted, been through the process. So, as you say, it becomes the excuse. And, it's funny, you remind me of a story that I saw over the long Thanksgiving weekend, and it was so tragic. And the brutality and the tragedy is clearly a deliberate part of policy. The college student that was going to surprise her mother and come home for Thanksgiving, she was deported to, I want to say Honduras, or I think some country in Latin America, where she had no connection to this country, hadn't been there since she was 7 years old. She had come to this country to realize the American dream, and indeed was attending college and was a scholastic star, and coming home to sort of take the victory lap with mom to surprise her for Thanksgiving. Now she's in Honduras with her grandmother. And again, I almost wept as I read this. And this is, as you suggested, the deliberate brutality of this administration.
Yeah, and that's just one of the cases that are publicized. There are a lot of people who are afraid to make a big deal out of the case that they're facing. I know a lot of people from academia. I used to work in academia, who over the last year have lost their fellowships, have lost their residency, are afraid to work here, and also afraid to bring their case to the press, in part because the press is largely compromised. Outlets that would have once run sympathetic coverage are now cowering to Trump, but also they're afraid of, being seen as a troublemaker, and they just simply want to live their lives. And, it's also, I think, a tactic, not just by Trump, but by this broader network surrounding him that has long targeted higher education. And we have this, deranged system in the US where higher education is unaffordable for most people. And the, money that's propping up the universities often comes from foreign students who are paying the full tuition, as opposed to American students who often, can't because it's too expensive, and they're getting fellowships, scholarships, etc. When you take away that foreign money, a lot of these institutions are going to fold. And then on top of that, you have Trump just doing extortion, doing blackmail tactics on a lot of research institutions. And so I think the goal is to stop research.
He just took down Northwestern University. Sorry to interrupt, but I just read it this morning of $75 million. Yeah.
Yeah, and they cave so easily. The ones who don't cave, often are able to keep going. But I think, they want to get rid of immigrants, especially from particular regions, Latin America, and, basically any Muslim country. They want to get rid of education, and this is a way to do it without directly demanding to the university, you must shut down. It just makes it impossible for them to run. You're seeing changes within this university, the gutting of the humanities, the social sciences, the replacement with AI. A lot of these AI companies are connected to Trump and the government, and to people in both parties. A lot of donors, come from these networks. And I think it just points to a general sense of the disposability of human life and the disposability of American sovereignty. Those are the two defining themes of Trump's rule, and they were the first term and they are the second term.
Because you say disposability of a human life, it makes me think of something else I wanted to ask you about, which is, we may look at what's happening in Venezuela, the aggressive and murderous policy that brings American firepower into these boats in international waters and blows them up. And then, as is suggested in this one instance, the one that we know about, there were survivors and there was return fire to take out the survivors, an obvious war crime. You could argue the international waters part of it is war crime in itself. But This is a clear war crime, even in a situation that would involve combat. And here's the part that is additionally disturbing to me, and I kind of wanted to get your impression because you're really good with like America and the texture of America. I feel as though this is something that Americans ultimately, in a way, don't care about. Am I wrong?
No, I don't think you're wrong. I think it's because most Americans are struggling to find out what's going on. I'm struggling to find out what's going on. And I just run into an endless series of paywalls, propaganda, partial stories that leave out the general context of Venezuela. Like when I would read a Trump corruption story about the former Soviet Union or about the Middle East, I had enough background information about those countries to make sense of what I was reading and to basically be able to decode the propaganda. I can't do that with Venezuela. I don't know enough about who the key players are or about what is happening beyond murder. I do know that Elliot Abrams is involved. Elliot Abrams of Iran-Contra fame, of Iraq War fame. He was then brought back. He was in the first Trump administration, gunning for an Iran war. He was in the Biden administration right before the U.S. went on to aid Israel in its attempted genocide of Gaza. And so whenever Elliot Abrams is involved in something, particularly something in Latin America, bad things are afoot. When I noticed that, I went and I looked, to see for follow-up, like what exactly is he doing there? Why is he, this guy, this infamous individual, in the news yet again? Found very little. Same thing happened when he entered the Biden administration. And I keep wondering, why are the same people installed in administration after administration, time after time? That we saw this with Bill Barr. We see these sort of rotating actors who have really nefarious aims in terms of global policy regarding, two particular regions. Again, Central America and the Middle East. And those are also the regions where, Trump is targeting immigrants. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I mean, some of this is just oil. Some of this is, fossil fuel battles, which go back many, many, many decades. But I think there's more to it than that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did want to ask you about that because that does seem to be like the next few moves will be related to that regime change and access to oil. I mean, isn't that that's the one play most certainly? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're certainly after that. They don't have any intention of, doing anything about climate change or the harm of fossil fuels. They're pushing all these AI initiatives that are draining our water. I mean, if anything, they're accelerating it. I noticed that Trump once again is targeting Ilhan Omar, targeting her because she's from Somalia, saying that, she's not a legitimate representative for that. Notably, Ilhan Omar's first kind of big scene in Congress was bringing up Elliot Abrams and wondering, why is he involved in Venezuela? Why is this, Iran-Contra notorious goon, making our foreign policy? And that was all the way back in, I think, 2019. And so I kind of wonder if his presence is something that's, underlying some of these decisions, because I really don't think it's Trump that is the geopolitical mastermind behind any of this. If there's money to be made, I'm sure he's very interested. But I think it's this, different groups for different measures. Some of it's tech, some of it's, fossil fuels and oil. Some of it is just general theocratic madness. There's all sorts of terrible things to choose from. So, this one unfortunately captures a lot of different things at once.
Yeah, the all-you-can-eat buffet of terribleness.
Yeah,
You're absolutely right. It is worth noting that it's now being called out a bit, the way in which, I call them the Billionaire Boys Club, the world of Trump at the White House is just surrounded by all these billionaires, Bessent and Lutnick and all of these guys. And they all seem to either have direct interest in, or many around Trump and big donors have interests in, a lot of the things that are being directly affected now by American foreign policy. This is happening in the Middle East. It's happening in Latin America. And so as these emerging problems in Latin America come to light, it does appear as though there is a business connect between the Trump administration and so many of these things that are also involved in strategic American policy. This on a level we really have never seen before.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an extension of a lot of crises we have seen, namely the ones I just mentioned that Elliot Abrams was involved in,
Sure, sure.
Iran-Contra, the Iraq War, the aftermath of the 2008 global collapse, where we saw these billionaires increase their wealth, even though Americans, were desperately seeking jobs and security. I think the kind of arms trading and drug trafficking and, mass murder and wildness of the late 1980s of the Reagan administration, that's what this kind of reminds me of the most, in terms of things like bombing fishermen in Venezuela. But the thing I've noticed is that there's just no effort at accountability, at transparency, at holding hearings, at impeachment. When people bring up impeachment for the multitude of crimes that this administration has committed, they laugh it off yet again, even though they shouldn't have done that in the first administration. Pelosi had to be dragged to impeach Trump. Ultimately did. They should have taken it very seriously when it was at the end of his term and the entire country was pretty much united because of January 6th. They should have made it impossible for him to run again. They did not. They didn't even put up kind of a moral front. They're accepting a lot of this as normal. They're placating these actors, and I think some of it has to do with the amount of money that is being exchanged. I think some of it has to do with the threats that are levied at those who, contest Trump. But mostly I think, we have a group of individuals who just see, the world as something to be divided up for parts. And that's not new. That's true of any kind of imperial entity. I think what's new is that the American government sees our country as something that also can be stripped down and sold for parts. Our lands gone, sold to foreign countries, our waters drained, given to Silicon Valley and to AI. And so that's what's different about this crisis, is that they're not even making a pretense of caring about, their own constituency. And that's because we don't have the leverage of free and fair elections anymore.
Wow, that was a great run. And I have to tell you, like, a lot of what Sarah just said is in her books. I mean, both hints of it and then the actual blow by blow X's and O's of what you've just mentioned. It's a sad fact also that we're seeing, as you suggest, the openness of this. There's a brazenness to this administration, and the link between that and the lack of the election process holding anybody accountable. You feel like that's I also feel like there's a huge price that's being paid because media has been completely co-opted.
Yeah, media got co-opted very quickly. If you compare, the first term of Trump to the second, it's a world of difference. The investigative reporters that were bringing forth documents are, were basically, they lost their job around the time of, it was actually during the Biden administration, time of high inflation and a lot of job loss in media. A lot of outlets that would have covered all of this, BuzzFeed, Vice, the Daily Beast, say what you will about them, but they did cover corruption. They no longer exist, or they're greatly reduced. Other people are publishing behind a paywall, which I think is irresponsible if you're a multi-millionaire with, high level security information. I think that's kind of grotesque. There's no sort of sense of cohesion, and that began about 10 years ago because of streaming, because of the loss of like TV as something, everyone was kind of watching the same stuff. Even if they didn't like it, they were aware of it. People are siloed by that and by algorithms. And so they often don't know what it is that they're supposed to be caring about or reacting to. And it's not like there's some, voice from above telling you, care about this. But I think there are a lot of things that people naturally would care about if they knew that they were going on. You often see this when Trump voters are interviewed and they're told about, regular folks, not people in gangs, not criminals, not terrorists, but just, regular people, grandmothers, restaurant owners in their communities getting deported because of Trump, and they're genuinely surprised. And I see sometimes skepticism expressed, like, of course he was going to do it. How could they not know that? And I think, where would they have heard it? All the articles that were laying out what he was actually going to do, not all of them, but most of them, were paywalled, and they were constantly getting fed a stream of propaganda and lies, either directly from Trump himself or from his acolytes, who use these algorithms, who use these social media companies to target with such precision people's anxieties, people's fears, and then they exploit them by giving them this false information. And then it's innocent people, it's very vulnerable people who pay the greatest price for that.
This makes me now want to play for Sarah the Thanksgiving thing, Tony. Can you rally that? This is a Thanksgiving Zoom that, how families on Thanksgiving will Zoom in if they can't all be there in person. This is really out there, but it speaks to the cultism maybe and anger. If Tony can rally it, I'll play it for you. But essentially, you had a manifestation of the cultism in that whatever Trump wants to do is fine. So these extrajudicial killings, fine. Go ahead, Tony, play it. It's to see it played out. It almost plays like a sketch. But go ahead.
In any other country, if he would go on the TV and spout that shit off, he would be executed.
This is about the.
That's not true.
That's not true.
Legislators.
He's a traitor.
The video saying
should members of the military follow unlawful orders?
Yes.
What?
They should follow any order that the president gives.
That's
and the
correct.
government gives.
That's wrong.
Even if it breaks laws?
It will endanger other people if you don't follow orders.
What if President Trump orders a squad of army guys to walk down the street killing anyone they see? They should do it?
Yes.
Mom?
Yes.
What?
I don't even understand. Like, how can you come to that conclusion?
It sounds to me like you lefties are now beginning to fear the fact that the military is going to get involved and your asses are grass.
No, it's because you're in a cult.
What if Donald Trump says, I want you to carpet bomb Oklahoma City, kill everyone? You think the Air Force should carry that out?
Yes.
There might be a reason. We don't know.
This is insane.
You cannot be this stupid. Jesus
all right, so you get the idea. I'm not going to play anymore, but that speaks to the cultism, Sarah, just a bit. I mean, I feel as though there's a cultism that's now an adjunct to a lot of other stuff that you've described through the years.
There's been cultism for a while. I mean, I would want to know about that particular family because, quite honestly, it did seem to me like a sketch. I mean, it might be a sketch that reflects actual conversations that are being happening, but the way that it was staged, the yes of the father was like the exact same clip, I think.
Oh, you think? Okay, we'll have to go back.
I don't know. I don't know who they are. I'm sure there are. Yeah. I mean, I've met people, who have this view, especially this view of the presidency of something akin to a benign dictatorship, where if the president says it should happen, then the president can do it, and they don't always, feel that way when the president is not of their political party or expressing a view that they disagree with. But, with Trump, I mean, I think some of it is a sort of oppositional defiance for the sake of it. I think some of it comes from fear, because what they saw in the way that Trump flexed his power, especially that he faced no consequences for January 6th, is you could choose two sides in their cases. They could be on the side of the evil, powerful people who get to do whatever the hell they want. And therefore, they think that that kind of elite impunity is transferable, that they too will have it and will own it if they take this side. Or they will be on the side of the victims who have no legal recourse, who have no journalistic sympathy, who don't have the people behind them, who don't know what to do when these things happen. So I think a lot of people pick more of an in-between place where they just get very quiet. They stop talking about political things altogether. This exactly reminds me of what I would see when I studied authoritarian states as an academic. You suddenly just see people posting pictures of their pets and recipes and nothing else, just content that won't offend anybody. But when they do, participate, it's all like, let's hail the dictator, because that is the safer position. But it also, to them, I think, is the stronger position. The thing is it doesn't work out that way. It will always backfire. And everyone who has worked with Donald Trump would be able to tell you that in the end, he will always screw you over. More than being an autocracy, this is a mafia state. This is a transactional criminal empire, and they don't have anything that he wants. He doesn't really want their votes. He doesn't care. He's not out to win them over, with his charm. He's not at home weeping if somebody doesn't like him. None of these guys care because they have billions of dollars and total, criminal impunity with no justice system holding them back. So what the average American wants, it's of no interest to them. And I do wish that these individuals who have fallen into a cult-like way of viewing Trump, and I do think it's a small part, like there's the Trump voters and then there's like the hardcore base, and the hardcore base is kind of beyond help to a certain extent. They're really in it for the long run. They're gonna ride with him, ride or die. And unfortunately with Trump and RFK Jr., that's a very literal proposition. So.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. And I should note, just on the heels of that polling shows that those who are not in the ride or die group, they're in the independent group, et cetera. I mean, he's really falling off a ledge that way. Now, again, will that matter with the elections coming up? With the quote elections coming up, we'll see. You mentioned Eastern Europe, and you just know so much in that world. And I just want to quickly visit Russia and Ukraine, because that 28-point deal was handed down, and it was, endorsed by Trump quickly between, golf rounds. And then it's revealed quickly also that it was translated from Russian. It clearly feels as though it was translated from Russian. It was essentially a surrender, and then it's revealed that the strategy here, and this is something that I feel like you were aware of already for a long time, is to recharacterize, this is a strategy on the part of the Russians, recharacterize the Russians not as a military threat, but actually as an economic and business opportunity for so many wealthy Americans, billionaires like Witkoff, who was handling the negotiations, and those around Witkoff, Kushner, et cetera. And so they have a bunch of frozen assets that they'd like to unfreeze, and they'd like to convince these business people, again, those that I've mentioned and more, that now we can work together with all of these additional assets and with Russian business opportunities. And so to recharacterize Russia in this way is very appealing to this crew that's in Washington right now.
Well, of course it is. I mean, these are the people who've been working with Trump since the 1980s. Trump Tower was essentially a dorm for the Russian mafia. And since the collapse of the Soviet Union, it's these mafiosos and these oligarchs who have held the shots. And throughout, the Russia-Ukraine war, I've basically thought that there is a quieter war that's been going on underneath that has much more to do with money, less with territory and the sort of imperial, Putin wants to reconquer the Soviet Union sense, although that is also there too. And of course, Ukraine is resisting against that. But I think there have been, quite a lot of deal making that is behind the scenes. And that is one of the reasons that this war has dragged on so long, is because it's basically two wars. There's a conventional land war above, and then there's the criminal underworld below. And that underworld, thrives in both of these countries. And the more, they fall apart due to warfare, the easier it is for criminality to thrive. I think it's interesting, that somebody, multiple people closely wedded to Israel are so invested in this war. If you go back to 2016, you'll see similar deals being made with Kushner, with Vitaly Churkin, who was the Russia's ambassador to the UN, later revealed as a Jeffrey Epstein associate, with Michael Flynn. This has always been the way that Trump and his gang operated. Of course, Paul Manafort, a Kremlin asset, running his campaign. I could go on and on naming all these people, and they're actually in the books. But a lot of people like to blow off Russia. They'll call it Russiagate or something. They don't understand that this is just another manifestation of oligarchy, of plutocracy, of hypercapitalism, of elite criminal impunity. These are the same as the awful billionaires that are in the United States or the United Kingdom or other places in the West. This is simply the Russian version of them, and they work together with bad actors in the West, and they certainly work together with bad actors in Israel, because Israel is often where they will give them a place to go, asylum, if they end up getting sanctioned by the West. You could see people like Roman Abramovich, going straight to Israel as soon as he got sanctioned for his dirty deeds. They also are funding Congress. They give money to U.S. proxies, and then those proxies donate into campaigns. And then that helps determine what kind of military equipment a place like Ukraine gets. And so I think it's really important to look at all that. No one wants to, because they're giving to both sides of the aisle. Like, they know how to play this game. You don't just control one party, you control both in different ways. And with Trump, it's really easy to control Trump if you are from Russia and involved in Russian the economy, a businessman, the Russian mafia, because Russia, because Trump has been hooked up with the Russian mafia for 4 decades. So they know this guy really well. They don't even really have to blackmail him. He's a volunteer. And he has, interest in this, a soft spot, if you will. But I think it's really his heirs, the people surrounding him, individuals like Kushner. You should watch out for what they want to do to Ukraine and what they want to do to Gaza, because I think that will herald what they want to do to the world at large.
So well said. And I just think that now the brazen nature of it, to get back to what we were talking about at the very beginning of this conversation, has led so many business people and these people who are associated with Trump, even in a tangential way from a business standpoint, they see the opportunity here and they can operate in a brazen way also. And it's a fascinating thing to see. You lay it bare in your books, the way that he was in bed with the Russians from the very start. And just on the books, I want to mention that Sarah has a sale on today. It's one day. You can get 2 books, Hiding in Plain Sight and They Knew. You'll get the ebooks. And I believe Kim has the, we have a link to it under this video. But the key is that in both these books, and these aren't all of Sarah's books, they're just 2 of Sarah's books. In both these books, you get Epstein, you get Trump, you get all of these things that came to pass. I mean, it's kind of eerie almost, the way that Sarah Kedzior walks us through that which we're living. Only you did it years before we were living it.
Yeah, well, we were living it. It's just people wouldn't acknowledge that we were living it, which, caused me an enormous amount of problems because I could see this future coming and desperately wanted it to be stopped. It's very frustrating for anybody who covered Epstein. It's obviously most frustrating for the women who came forward and testified to this, but also, journalists like Julie K. Brown, they're out there saying the stuff released by Congress, a lot of it is not new. These were public domain documents who our press refused to cover, our Congress refused to examine, and they have not held these predators accountable. And it's been enormously frustrating to see sometimes literal lines from my work just stolen by other journalists, put behind paywalls, quoted. And these are well-known lines, like something like, this is a transnational crime syndicate masqueraded as a government. Like, people hold that up at protests. Like, you should probably try to plagiarize something that didn't sell this many copies. But it's more disheartening, not just like for me, like I'm not the big victim here. The victim is this country. It's everyone who's been hurt by this administration. It's everybody who, thought that Biden and others would stop it, would take action while they could to prevent them from coming back, because of course they were going to come back worse than when they started, and they were going to get done all the things that they weren't able to finish doing in the first term, only with so many advantages, the courts on their side, advances in technology like AI that gives them plausible deniability over different things, alliances with the media and with big tech that weren't really, so secure before. So it's disastrous. It breaks my heart. It tends to take people about 4 years to kind of, for my ideas to be viewed as lunacy and then be now seen as mainstream opinion. Hiding came out in 2020. They Knew came out in 2022. So my last book, The Last American Road Trip, came out in 2025. And that's the nice, sweet one, where I drive around the country with my family and I show my kids America. And I'm worried about what's going to come. But I keep wondering what the world will be like in 2029 when that book is maybe conventional wisdom. And I think, two things will be there. Either we will have actually made some progress towards accountability, and we will have, restored an appreciation for the good things in America that we have to offer, our national parks and so forth. Or this will be like reading a travelogue of the end of the Soviet Union written in like 1989,
Wow.
by a family
Wow.
driving through the 15 republics. Like, I don't know. I'm hoping obviously it's the first scenario.
Yeah, as I've told you before, I just think that book is so poignant in many places. Maybe because of the backdrops, you come to all of these different stops, but then you kind of look back through history and review the moments, and your family's there. So I guess it just landed with me a little differently than some of the other stuff. Anyway, the Last American Road Trip is the book we're talking about. But before that was They Knew, Hiding in Plain Sight, The View from Flyover Country, and once again today is this special deal. It's only for today, a $2.99 price. You get both Hiding in Plain Sight and you get They Knew. And we'll have a link to it, as we do always, a link to all of Sarah's books and her Substack as well. But that special link to get both those books today for just $2.99, that'll be a link under this video. Huge fans. We continue. And I really so appreciate you spending Mondays with us, Sarah. I really look forward to it every week. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Same.
Okay. We'll see you next time.
Okay, thank you.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I am rejoining for a brief moment to tell you about one of our great partner sponsors, Sweet106bakery.com. Layered cupcakes, they come to you in these containers. There's the chocolate chip cookie. There's the double vanilla. There's the Dubai chocolate. There's birthday cake. There's so many different delicious flavors. Christy has won the only war that should ever be fought, the cupcake war. And she's won it twice. So this is somebody who really knows her way around baking and creating these wonderful confections. I encourage you to check this out. The dulce de leche, the Snickers with a Z, Christie's Southern Red Velvet. It's all so delicious. Order at sweet106bakery.com, sweet like a suite of rooms, S-U-I-T-E, sweet106bakery.com. Use our discount code. You'll get 15% off. The reaction has been so wonderful from our audience, and if you haven't tried them, please do. Great for gifts as well, cooked in small batches, so they are sent out that way for freshness ensured. Sweet106bakery.com. Mark T at checkout for 15% off. Sweet106bakery.com.
The Mark Thompson Show.
So excited to have our next guest on. I think she is maybe without peer in terms of getting real issues out in a real across-the-fence way. Her style has caught on in such a way that she is a phenomenon when it comes to politics. She's called Politics Girl. How about it? Leigh McGowan, everyone. How are you?
Hi, I'm totally agreeing with John there. I have a lot of righteous indignation myself.
Yeah, no, I know. You're great. Yours is couched in, I don't know, in like a chocolatey shell to me. Rothman is a little in your face, but we all kind of share the...
Men out there, they might not feel that way. I don't think they think I'm in a candy shell. I think they think I'm way too much in your face.
Way in the face of the enemies, the paid opposition. I've seen you take on Scott Jennings at CNN. I love how you just don't blink. You know, those rugby scrums of rhetoric where they put like 6 people around a table and you've got to, those are not easy, and somehow you do it.
Yeah, I think I was trained to do it at my dining room table growing up. I had a dad that really liked to debate and who was really quite convinced he was right on every topic. And I think I learned to do it as a small child. I also think he enjoyed it. I think he enjoyed having a sparring partner. He was a lawyer, and I didn't turn out to be the lawyer that he wanted me to be, but I do like to get into a debate. So I think I come by it naturally. And funny, I do think that there's a lot of women out there who stop me on the street and say, thank God you said it, because I was screaming at the TV.
I just because you mentioned women, I must tell you, it really is frustrating, the patriarchy that you see in America, certainly worldwide, but there are a lot of developed nations that have evolved past it. You know, we've seen women take on leadership roles in Latin America. We've seen them take on leadership roles in Europe. And America, it just feels like, God damn it, I don't understand why we just can't get past that last little challenge.
Yeah,
I guess it's not so
quite
little.
amazing. No, it's not. It's not so little. We talk a lot about America's racism and how, that's one of our initial failings is our racism. But I honestly think that we are also an incredibly sexist country. And I don't think it has served us in any way. I don't think we are thriving because we have kept women back. I don't think we are thriving because we haven't put women in charge. And I say all the time, I'm absolutely ready for the matriarchy. And people are like, oh, you just want women in charge of everything. And I'm like, that's not what a matriarchy is. The matriarchy is not the reverse of the patriarchy. It's not women on top. A matriarchy centers children. So what's best for children? What's best for the kids? Do they have safe drinking water? Do they have good places to live? Do they have proper health care? Do they have good education? Because if you center children, everyone thrives. And that's really what a matriarchy is. It's much more communal. It's much more putting the weaker people first, making sure you're looking out for those who are sick or wounded or small, like children. And if you make sure that life is safe and good for them, then life turns out to be safe and good for lots of other people. And in many ways, I think women have been brought down perpetually. This idea that, a woman could never be president because, once a month she's going to be completely irrational. And I'm like, well, hasn't every single war in America been started by a man? You know what I mean? That's not some woman at her time of the month. It's some man who thought he could get something from war.
Right. I wish it was only once a month for guys. I mean, it's every day of the month. That's the problem. Our testosterone, our machismo, our egos, it's awful. And I'm not some self-hating guy. I mean, I'm a guy all the way through, but I'm done with it, man. And I've seen, we have a sponsor on our show. We don't have a lot of sponsors. We have a couple of small sponsors, and they're really great partners. And one of them is a coffee company called Coachella Valley Coffee, okay? And these guys are involved in seeding, that is to say, funding various businesses around the world. They are growers of coffee, and then they get the coffee, and they're kind of partners also. So the original plan was to seed with all this money around the world in these various coffee plantations, or whatever they call them now. And the reality was that all the guys, all the male-run businesses, they took that money and just squandered it. They almost to a grow. They weren't getting any product back, and so that now they only fund women-owned businesses around the world, and they say the women are crushing it. And so, I mean, I don't mean to be a self-hating dude, but I'm just saying there it is. There is evidence, and it's right here on our show.
Mark, you're not a self-hating dude. Here's the thing. I always say, I am surrounded by men. I married a good man. We've been married for almost 21 years. I'm raising a good man. He just graduated from high school. He's going off to New York. My mother died years ago, so I only have my father. I am surrounded by men, and I love men. And I think men can be wonderful leaders. I think they can be wonderful partners. But I think that the patriarchy in itself has really damaged men, and not just women. I think it's damaged men completely. This idea of this male loneliness epidemic that we're hearing about now, that's not unreal. It actually exists. There are tons of lonely men. The people who kill themselves the most are men over 65. That's the highest level of suicide. The people who shoot up schools, men. The people who shoot up their wives, men. Domestic violence is all men. The most cause of suicide is for older men who feel alone, and the most cause of homicide is for men who feel like their spouse or partner has hurt their manhood. And so it really hurts everyone to say this is the one way that men should behave and this is how men should act, and then it hurts all of our society. That's why I say, I think we really need to think of a different way to do this. And I think it's ironic that we're talking about that now, where we have the most toxically patriarchal government that we've had ever, probably, because we're seeing everything from UFC fights on the White House lawn to, trying to push women back into the kitchen and take our votes with things like the SAVE Act. So it's quite amazing to see people saying, hold on for a second, at the same time that we have a government that is so willing to take one entire group's power away from them.
I'm so glad you mentioned this. I was just about to say that this crowd has leaned into a kind of toxic masculinity, and the UFC fight is, perhaps the most immediate example. It's coming up in a few weeks, having it on the White House lawn. It's just part of this, the kind of pugilism associated with machismo, and then Pete Hegseth struck in, and we're going to lethality, and we're going to take the handcuffs off of our warriors, and and then actually demoting and getting rid of women in the military. I mean, the hits that are being taken by women. And you did something, and this is we had you booked on the show, which I was so delighted about, because you had been, I think it's been since your book you haven't been here, but
so long.
Yeah, it's been too long. So, but I saw then, because we were going to have you on anyway, that you had predicted quite offhandedly, I think it was on CNN or something, you said, I wouldn't be surprised if the next person to go from this administration is a woman like Tulsi Gabbard or someone like that. And boom, Tulsi Gabbard within 48 hours was gone.
Yeah, because the only people that have been really fired from this cabinet or from higher level positions are all women that were put into these positions of power so they could say, see, we're not sexist. We have all these women. And then those are the first people to go. And then they're putting people in that they're not even getting Senate confirmation for, because they're saying, oh, well, this is just an acting, secretary of the blah, blah, blah. And they can get away with having someone that could never get approved otherwise. No business doing the job. Do you see who they put in Tulsi Gabbard's case? I mean, holy hell, that guy's going to use the entire national intelligence against anyone that just says something offhand about the president. That guy's going to be in there like, get into jail, hop into this detention camp. It's ridiculous what we are doing right now. Obscene.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And you're right. This sort of way that they slither this administration past any kind of confirmation process favors these guys who are just Trump loyalists and who are just going to make sure that now the intelligence community and the intelligence information can be turned as a weapon, even more specifically on dissent against the president. It's a scary
you look at someone
time.
like Mark Mullen, running DHS. He's not confirmed. He just took over when they got rid of Kristi Noem, right? And they didn't do anything with Kristi Noem with the amount of money she spent, the amount of money she lost. She spent $250 million on an ad. One ad. Where did that money go? Like, where's the congressional hearing for that, right? But she gets sort of scooted off to the side, despite the fact that she's still living in Navy housing in the Admiral of the Coast Guard's house in San Diego. She still lives there, which is ridiculous because she doesn't have a job. And now we have Mark Wayne, who is literally the biggest yes man that ever was. And it doesn't matter if we, kill immigrants in the street as long as Donald Trump is happy.
Yeah, no, he's cranked it up. It's just he's doing it in a lower profile way. So it's not going to quite get the it's interesting that Noem, as you say, was this profligate spender, was this clearly corrupt and horribly incompetent person. Even her testimony before oversight committees it was a sort of pilloried. They were the kind of things where people looked at them and they just, in other words, her incompetence was on display for all to see. And yet you're right. The follow-up on the clear no bid contracts, the media buys, all of that, there's been no congressional follow-up. How do you handicap that? Why is that?
I think because there is no, it's a little bit like raising children, right? If there's no repercussions for your actions, you will continue with the actions. There's zero repercussions for anybody in this administration's actions for anything that they do. I mean, they bought this woman 2 planes, 2 private jets with taxpayer money. One they had completely kitted out with like a king size bed in the back. So her and her boyfriend, who she's married, by the way, could, gallivant around America on the taxpayer's dime. Have we done anything about that? No. But that's also because in the scope of the Trump administration, that's small potatoes. I mean, we are literally watching grand larceny every single day with this administration. Not just like, oh, I'm skirting around the edges or, oh, I'm giving myself contracts, but like true insider trading, giving insider deals to people, the amount of pardons we've sold, the amount of people that we have let off the hook for money they owe back to the government for tax fraud or Medicare fraud or Medicaid fraud because they happen to be friends with Donald Trump or their friend gave $1 million or their mom gave $1 million and all of a sudden they're not held accountable. So I feel like Kristi Noem is small fry compared to everything else that's happening. And if everything is big, then nothing is big.
Yeah, and maybe you make me realize, too, that I think the stink of holding anyone to account gets back onto the administration, and therefore the administration snuffs that out. I mean, it makes perfect sense that way. It's not a one-off, as you say. It's of a kind, And because you mentioned taxes, I mean, this IRS cloak of immunity that Trump wants, and is going to get. I mean, it's the thing that survived, like the ballroom or I'm sorry, the slush fund money that seems to be gone. But the thing that has lasted is that one-page memo giving Trump and Trump businesses total immunity from IRS investigations and audits in perpetuity.
Well, let's be honest,
forever.
That's the thing he wanted, right? That's what he wanted. There's absolutely no reason, even if this case, which by the way, I'll remind people, this is a case where Donald Trump sued his own government for $10 billion for his tax returns being released during his first presidency, by the way, when he was in charge last time, along with 400,000 other people's tax returns. It's not like it was just Donald Trump's tax returns. And then he said, you owe me $10 billion, which is really, you owe myself $10 billion. The case never went to court. It's not like it was being settled. It never even went to court because it would have been thrown out. And his own attorney general, Todd Blanche, who we must remember is Donald Trump's criminal attorney for years and years and years. It's his own personal attorney. Again, an acting person. He's acting attorney general right now because Pam Bondi was fired. Said, you know what, we're not even going to go to court. We're just going to settle the case, which is not what the government does. The government goes to court. The government does things. No, they said, we're just going to settle the case. We're going to do this, wink and a nod, $1.776 billion slush fund for you to do whatever you want with. And then we're going to have this little side thing about you never have to be sued by the IRS. You can never be accused of cheating on your taxes again. That goes for your family and your friends and your businesses, which of course is ludicrous, serves no one except Trump and his family. And then now they're realizing, of course, the slush fund is not something they can give out, but they're keeping this IRS get it a jail free card, which is ludicrous from someone who's a well-known tax cheat. Like the whole thing should just upset everyone. It doesn't matter who you are a favor of in partisan wise. If you're a Republican, you should be upset. You're being robbed blind. If you are an independent, if you are an American in general and you say, well, where are my tax dollars going? Well, they're certainly not going to be going to Donald Trump paying his taxes or Donald Jr. paying his taxes or Eric or Tiffany or any of the rest of them, because we've just given them you do what you want whenever you want with your taxes for the rest of your life. The end. Goodbye. Have fun buying an island off the coast of Albania.
Which is really happening. It just may sound like a crazy thing that Leigh said, but no, that's actually happening from Jared Kushner. The dictatorial flex that is scary. I mean, that literally anyone in my family and any of my businesses forever cannot be subject to IRS audit. It is straight out of some kind of dictator's playbook.
Yeah, it's the same thing you would see in Russia. It's the same thing you see in Hungary. It's the same thing you see in Belarus, in Xi Jinping's China. Any place where you have someone who does not answer to the law, where the government answers to them, where they are able to change their own constitution, take over the courts, take over the media. Everything we see in these dictatorial nations, these authoritarian nations, is now happening here. And it's what Donald Trump's always wanted: power and endless money, and to not be held accountable by the law. I mean, he ran again, to not be held accountable by the law. We have to remember he has already been adjudicated 34 times, and he's an adjudicated rapist. He, was a felon, and now he's saying he's using his own Justice Department to go after E. Jean Carroll. You know what I mean? To say, even though he lost twice in court and owes her $85 million, he's now using his own Justice Department to go after her. This is exactly what dictators do, exactly what Putin would do. It's an entire playbook that they are using.
Let me ask you about another dictator, Orban, who was just voted out. I was encouraged by this, and I, did some reading on it and sort of saw the way in which this happened, because Orban did a lot of, as you know, Leigh, the Trump playbook was very much like the Orban playbook, going after media right away, going after legal institutions right away, going after academic institutions right away. So he was quite effective in leaning into the power he had. One difference I would say is that he was popular going in. Trump was never really popular. Okay. So,
yeah. Look.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Trump is popular with his base. He'll always be popular with his base. I mean, they are diehard ride and dies, you know what I mean? In a way that I've never seen with American politics before. But Orban was following Putin's playbook. They follow the same playbook in Belarus. It's a lot of taking over from the beginning, so people can't learn the correct information. They can't learn it from their courts. They can't learn it from their media. They can't learn it from their schools. And it's easier to take over. But I think you are right in being heartened by the fact that he just lost. He was in power for 16 years. He took over their courts. He changed their constitution. He completely dominated their media. In fact, his opposition couldn't even get their faces on the media. So what the opposition did was go from town to town, small village to small village, and talk to people, literally talk to people. He did door-to-door canvassing throughout the state, throughout the country of Hungary. And then it comes down to the people. And this is what I think Americans can learn from this, is that they came out at over 80% turnout, and over 80% turnout against the sitting governor, the sitting president, the sitting prime minister, whoever, against Orban. He couldn't overcome it. And it didn't matter how much he had taken over. The turnout itself allowed him to be removed. And that's even with the American vice president going to campaign for him in the last week, right? The whole thing was ludicrous. And yet they couldn't overcome voter turnout. And I want people to remember that, because if you look at even the California election that's happening today, at the primary that was yesterday, and they're still counting the ballots today, I think right now they're saying we had something like a 23% turnout. Now, a 23% turnout is pathetic. And if we had something like a 60% turnout or an 80% turnout, it would be a completely different result. But people just sort of sit it out and go, oh, well, I guess you can't change anything, or it's always going to be this, or it's always going to be that. Hungary shows us that's not the case. And even with everything that's going on across the country right now, with the gerrymandering, with what happened with the Supreme Court in Alabama recently, we could still have massive turnout in every single state in America and overcome what this particular government is doing enough to be able to hold them accountable using a Congress that is actually in opposition to this administration.
Yeah, it's interesting. I always I think this morning having this conversation with someone who was talking about, civil war and all this stuff. And I said, America's not a civil war country. We're like, isn't the NFL game, it's a Thursday night game this week, and then it's a Sunday, the kickoff's at what time? We're fat and happy. And yeah. I'm not saying that things aren't getting bad, because things are getting bad, and they're going to get worse, I suspect. But my point is, when it comes to marshaling people around the kind of thing you're talking about, which is a big voter turnout, enough anger to animate a populace to the point that they show up 80% the way they did in Hungary, it's tough. I think there's so many distractions in America. It's a different texture of this society and culture, don't you think?
In many ways, yes, I do. But I also think we're not as fat and happy as we used to be, right? People are not fat if they can't afford their groceries. They are not happy if they don't have health care. They are not pleased with these data centers popping up around their neighborhoods and no one listening to them saying, we don't want this. They are not pleased with the idea of full-time AI taking their jobs or surveillance at all times. They are not happy with the idea that the government is being run by people like Bezos and Palantir and, all these giant tech companies that then go off and live somewhere else because they've ruined what's here. They are not happy. So I think, yes, we are by nature kind of a entitled people. We're a little bit like, lying around in our own happiness, taking democracy for granted. And that did happen for a long time. But I think that people are less and less happy as time goes on. And I think we need to capitalize on that. And we need to tell people like, look, it doesn't have to be like this. This is not inevitable. As much as, he's trying to make us feel like it is by taking down the East Wing without even asking, or putting his name on the Kennedy Center, or building his arch, or building his ballroom, or whatever ridiculous vanity project we're working on now, where we feel like the FBI doesn't work for us, the CIA doesn't work for us, the Justice Department doesn't work for us. What's the point? I'll throw up my hands, forget it, I'll go watch football. It's not like that. I really do believe people have to understand that if your vote didn't count, they wouldn't be trying so hard to take it away. They wouldn't be trying so hard to get rid of mail-in voting or ballot drop boxes or changing the district lines mid, decade redistricting. Like, they are doing everything they can. They're pulling out every single stop because they know that if we get to November and we get a Democratic Congress, they are going to be held accountable. Someone is going to push back against these things that are happening. Someone's going to say, you know what? We don't want to be spending $1 billion on a war that you promised us we wouldn't be in. We actually need healthcare. We want money in our education. We want good roads and bridges. Where's our high-speed rail? What are we doing here? How is it that we send however many billions of dollars to Israel a year and they have universal healthcare and we don't? People are asking the questions now, and it's up to people like you and me to keep reminding them. I always say, be responsible for your people. Have these conversations at the grocery store, at the hairdresser, at your dining room table, and say, like, I'm curious, don't you think this is weird? It doesn't mean you have to be aggro with the people you're talking to, but it does mean you need to engage their curiosity to say, like, hold on, I don't want this. How do I change it?
Wow. it's if you could bottle that, what you've just done, you're just so good. I don't mean to embarrass you, but I just think this is your superpower, you know, so I'm so glad you're out there. Politics Girl will link to your website and all of your different, you know, so many different platforms. If you have one, I mean, podcast, I guess, is a great one. But if you have any other, if there's a specific place you want me to direct people, please let us know now. Otherwise,
yeah,
we'll
no,
post
please.
it.
We're revamping the Substack. That seems to be the place people are going now. The Politics Girl Substack is being revamped as we speak. You can always go to the website, and then of course I am Politics Girl everywhere you go on social media.
Yeah, really, really great. Well, you know how I feel about you. I'm so excited we got you back, and I hope you'll come through again. All right.
Of course. Thanks to everyone
right.
who still cares about this country.
Yeah, you're the best, Leigh McGowan. Thanks so much.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Is that Danny Wright joining us now? Danny Wright, are you Danny Wright? Everybody from the river.
It's the biggest applause I've ever received in my life.
From 97.7 The River.
That's funny. They didn't tell me you were coming on. How are you?
I know.
It was a surprise that we have Danny.
Congratulations on all the support, and how fun was that?
It was humbling. Very humbling.
Yeah. Well, you guys are both very gracious, but let me say that Kim stole an election from you, and I'm not happy about it.
Well, let me tell you that not almost all elections are corrupt. So, I mean, there's that.
What a zen way to look at it. I love it. Well, it's really nice to meet you, Danny. And I built a profile for my audience about who you might be and why they should vote for you over Kim. But clearly not enough of them listen to what I had to say.
No.
What was in the profile?
I said, look, he probably needs your vote more than Kim.
Right.
Kim lives in a little secure village there with, in the warmth of her home. And who knows where Danny is? He might be,
living under the Healdsburg Bridge.
Exactly.
The
he could be,
mean streets of Santa Rosa.
Thank you. And so
I'm right down the road in Petaluma, just so you know. So,
nice. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. Kim, would you like to apologize for having because you really did.
My bad, Danny. I'm sorry that I won.
Well, you don't have to be sorry. It's interesting because I don't know how much you were following this whole thing from the beginning of the announcements of the nominations, but
no, we were not. So fill us in. Yeah,
there was a lot of, and I don't want to throw anyone under the bus from the Bay Area Radio Museum, because this was their first time doing something like this, my understanding. But there was a lot of controversy in the beginning. Yeah.
I didn't know that. Oh.
Yeah. And so it turned into this. I mean, it was great for me just because I had a lot of content on my show. And so, and people really rallied behind the fact that A, someone local was nominated, and B, that there was some kind of shenanigans going on.
What was the controversy? Was someone?
There was someone. I won't. I'm not going to point.
Not naming names.
Not naming names, but there was somebody. And to be fair, I don't know if this person did it themselves or if someone they knows and loves them did it for them, or how it worked.
Right.
But there was one person who had 76,000 votes in like 2 days, 3 days. And so it was very obvious. And what? And it got to the point where I had, listeners of my show complaining to me about it. And I'm like, I'm just along the ride with you guys. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so they had, people looked into it, and it was, I don't know. Wow. Again, I don't know how it happened and why it happened, but I know why it happened, but I don't know how it happened.
Yeah.
So they took all those votes away.
Yeah.
It really was.
Wow. There was a battle for this award. This is crazy.
And I had people on, I won't name names again, but there was another person that went on social media and blamed me for having bots, because how can a guy from Santa Rosa have so many bots or so many votes?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, well,
this is so ridiculous.
I have a daily radio show that a handful of people listen to, so it happens. But I kept my.
Well, no, you've been very gracious about it, Danny, and you're even gracious in this moment, as I feel as though this award has been stolen from you. But what I'll also say about Danny Wright is that, he just made a point, which is that, you're on a station in North Bay of the Bay Area, and for you were the leader until we announced it on this show, and then Kim got a big surge of support.
Blame him. I blame Mark.
But I it was too late when I realized the errors of my ways, and I started really pushing for Danny. I couldn't get enough of my audience turned around to outvote Kim, but I don't know. It's only for the year. Also, this expires in. Is it the calendar year, or when is it?
I mean, I don't know. The voting felt like it was 6 months. So
it is true.
We have to cheapen it, Mark. It will be with us forever.
That's true. It is.
Yeah.
You know, when they look down the list of all the winners, you know, Kim's name will be right there. So
I'm going to make a pledge now that next year I am throwing the full force of this show behind Danny Wright to win this award.
What if you're nominated, Mark Thompson?
No, I will vote for Danny over me. I mean it. I feel as though
he wants to get me off the streets of Santa Rosa. It's a charity case, but that's fine. I'll take.
When is your show on? Give me so if people want to listen. It's streamable too, right?
It is this way up at 9. The website, well, the radio station is 97.7 The River in Santa Rosa, Sonoma County. And it's on 977theriver.com if you want to listen. We have an app as well. And I do the morning show from 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. And that's on the air. And then I do, as you would imagine, a whole lot of work behind the scenes for our entire company. That's the website. There it is. In fact, I don't know. Can you go on social media on your newfangled computer thing here? I don't know.
Which social media do you want us on?
Well, I was going to tell you that I had a little fun with this morning as well on my Instagram. And
Albert, can you do it? Or where is it?
It's at Danny Wright Show if you find it on Instagram or Facebook.
No, Instagram or Facebook at Danny Wright Show. Albert will try to scramble to get it.
Okay, great.
We didn't want to tell Kim you were going to be on. We just
and I didn't mention that I was coming on here. I just you guys know obviously about the Russian couple that climbed the Empire State Building, and there's been memes all over the place with the flag that they. So I made my own version of the flag meme, and I posted it on my socials. And people are, they're
there it is. Danny Wright was robbed. I love it. I love it. I love it. I agree.
Just some of the comments are just wild.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, it's pretty
people with family in Santa Rosa.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
We should spend some time checking out Danny's show, says Judy.
We should.
Both shows work really hard.
I'll have to turn it over to from KZST over to the river and check you out.
They're right next door to me, so I can bang on the window over there anytime.
Buddha 3 says, I like this guy a lot. Robbed, says Norm. Norm gets it. Norm gets it.
What happened to my people? All of a sudden, they're
your people. You know what happened? They realized they have buyer's remorse. Your people. Okay, Kim.
That is not right.
Danny, we love you. Next year, Danny,
thank you, Danny,
you come here, and I'm pushing for you, my friend.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming through.
Thank you so
much. All right. It's the great Danny Wright on the river. 97.7 right there in Sonoma County. I love it.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Well, what can I say? I am doing this recorded outro, and I'll be honest with you, as I always like to be. I am recording it before I actually saw the Best Of show, but I'm confident that the Best Of show is something special. I'm confident right now, having seen the Best Of show, that it was something really extraordinary and included some terrific stuff.
And this is their new host.
I'm hoping that you enjoyed it as well.
What?
I also am hoping that you'll rejoin us on Monday. Full slate of great regulars in the week ahead. Gary Dietrich on Monday, Sarah Kedzior on Monday, David K. Johnston joins on Tuesday, Jared Yates Sexton and John Rothman on Wednesday, the brilliant former federal prosecutor David Cash on Thursday. Shadow, please, I'm speaking Shadow.
Bye-bye.
All right, thanks everybody. Appreciate a great week of support. Until next time, bye-bye.